You guys ready? Okay. I'd like to call to order the April 15th, 2024 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session on April 1st regarding real estate and legal case number 19024-00904. Also, prior to this meeting, we held exec session regarding student discipline and the same legal case. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who are viewing remotely. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes? Oh, shit. I missed a line. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Wow.
Apologies.
That was a YouTube moment. It was not me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow.
I neglected my reading glasses tonight, so I apologize. I jumped forward in the agenda. I'm okay. So I'll try once again. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes? Okay. I'd like to now call on the board secretary for a roll call of board members.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brand.
Here.
Dr. Bucks.
Here.
Dr. Cravaport.
Here.
Dr. Demo. Here. Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Colby.
Here.
Dr. Miller.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we'll move to communications. Mr. Johnson will provide us with a superintendent update.
Thank you, Amy. I have quite a few here. Congratulations to the Delta Program English teacher Amy Allison for recently receiving the 2024 Freedom. There we go.
Doing great.
Yeah, we're starting off wonderful.
Recording in progress.
Oh, wow.
There we go. Freedom Through Literacy Judith's Award for her advocacy for teens class. The founders of Judith's Reading Room, a Pennsylvania-based literacy nonprofit that was founded 106 libraries around the world, came to Delta to present the award to Amy and class consultant Virginia Squire. The award is one of the nonprofit's most prestigious, named after Judith Grugg, an American Libraries Association librarian who devoted her life to advocating for First Amendment rights. The Advocacy for Teens class taught students how to engage in civic and cultural literacy and advocate for issues. For their first project, they researched an aspect of SLO Center Region Library and gave a presentation at their respective township meeting. Thank you to Amy and Virginia for your outstanding work with our students. Thank you to the Giant Company for the $19,996.44 donation through their Feed in School Kids initiative. This generous contribution will have a significant impact on our ability to provide nutritious meals to the almost 7,000 students in our district. The funds will be used to support our food services program, ensuring that all of our students have access to the nourishment they need to learn and thrive. We are incredibly grateful to the Giant Company and to the many community members who donated to this important cause. I am pleased to announce that a long-running streak is still alive. For the 11th consecutive year, the 20th since 2000, we have received the Best Communities for Music Education designation from the National Association of Music Merchants. Congratulations to our stellar music department faculty for yet another national recognition. It's a testament to our consistent excellence and commitment. Congratulations also are in order for Cindy Surgeon Smith, our homeschool visitor and homeless liaison. Cindy was named WTAJ's Woman of the Year in the station's Remarkable Women series, part of a nationwide Next Star Media initiative to honor the influence that women have had on public policy social progress, and the quality of life. As one of more than 100 regional winners, Cindy traveled to California to receive her honor and is eligible for the Next Star Media Woman of the Year Award. And last but not least, congratulations to Park Forest Middle School counselor Brittany Chamberlain for being inducted into Juniata College Sports Hall of Fame. Brittany, volleyball player and 2009 graduate, was one of 13 alumni chosen by a selection committee consisting of current student athletes, coaches, and athletic administrators. And that would be it. Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Could I add something to communications?
Sure. Can we let the student representative
And that's fine.
finish? That'd be great. So Mr. Ramirez Aragon has a student update for us.
Yes, so thank you, Dr. Vader. Before tonight's meeting, the Board of Directors had an opportunity to recognize two amazing students for their academic achievements. Dalia El Dawoodi for winning a gold medal in dental terminology, and Morgan Snellick for also winning a gold medal in physical therapy at the Pennsylvania Health Occupation Students of America State Conference. Congratulations to the 21 State High students selected to the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association All-State Music Ensembles. A list of their names is on the district website in the news section. Students who made the PMEA All-District and Regional Ensembles are also recognized on the website, and congratulations to them as well. Congratulations to State High student Riley Kilbride for winning a gold medal in the Automotive Service Technology Competition at the State Leadership and Skills Conference, qualifying him for a national competition in Atlanta.
Thank you, Bruno. Dr. Crevecoeur, did you have something else you
Yes, I
wanted to add
did.
first?
Thank you. Yes, I was the privilege enough to attend the Advanced Biology Elective Symposium Research today, and I just wanted to congratulate Ms. Danielle Rosensteel and her students. They did an amazing job, and also she might be traveling to Columbia this summer to implement some of the research that the students did. So I just want to tell them congratulations.
Yeah, it was a really lovely presentation. I was able to make it too, and thanks to the SCASD Ed Foundation as well, who supplied a lot of the funding for some of their projects. So it was really fun to see the outcomes. Up next, we have a legislative update. Jackie, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
So I just have one thing tonight. I want to let everyone know that the window for the board to submit proposals to the PSBA 2025 legislative platform is open. So that window is from April 1st to June 28th. Boards may create new proposals, voice support for the continuation of specific items in the current platform, amend existing platform language, or suggest the deletion of a current statement. I will put the 2024 legislative platform into your inbox, so if you feel like looking at it, you may. And then we'll all get to draw straws to figure out who's going to go to that meeting later.
Yeah, I was just going to add at the end, I received an email from PSBA giving us a heads up to start thinking about who may want to go to that. So
It's riveting.
Yeah.
I've gone 2 years in a row, so come with me.
I think it's in November. Do you know? I can forward the date to
It's
people.
usually the early November.
Yeah, thanks.
Quick correction.
Yeah.
The Park Forest Middle School counselor was Bethany, not Brittany, Bethany Chamberlain. That was a grammatical error here.
Oh, congratulations, Bethany. Okay, so we'll have Region Council of Governments reports. Gretchen or Peter?
None this evening.
Okay, great. So at this time, we have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not on the action item portion of the agenda. For those action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item, as required by school code. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations, but you can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Is there anyone here in person interested in making a public comment? Yeah. So if you can share your name and where you live in the district for the record.
Hi, my name is Shay McGowan. I'm standing here as the president of the State College Area Education Association. And I am going to be making a comment about the new K-12 MTSS and Literacy Intervention Specialist that's going to be discussed during Information Reports 12B. Today I stand before you with a heavy heart, grappling with a decision that weighs heavily on my conscience and challenges the very core of our values of educators. The decision to eliminate the role of instructional coaches in our elementary schools while simultaneously creating positions that essentially replicate their duties is one that I must in good conscience speak up about. At the surface, the replication of this new position is support for the Director of Federal Funds and not necessarily support for our elementary teachers. In the last 4 years, our elementary teachers have continually seen support taken from them. They lost their instructional technology coaches in 2020, which was temporarily, by the way. Then their K-5 Director of Curriculum, and now they're instructional coaches. Losing instructional coaches at a time when 3 new curriculums are being rolled out is tough to swallow and fathom. While the creation of the elementary coordinators looks good on paper, 2 people for 8 schools doesn't often offer much support. As educators, our primary mission is to support, uplift, and empower one another in the noble pursuit of educating and nurturing the hearts and minds of our students. Our instructional coaches are the silent champions who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to provide guidance, curriculum support, and professional development to our teachers. Their expertise, dedication, and unwavering commitment to supporting elementary teachers do not go unnoticed. Yet, despite their invaluable contributions, we find ourselves at a crossroads, faced with the painful reality that some of our elementary teachers feel undervalued, unsupported, and underutilized in their expertise. It pains me to hear these sentiments echoed within our ranks, for they reflect our failure as leaders to truly listen, acknowledge, and honor the voices and experiences of those who we entrusted to serve. The decision to eliminate instructional coaches while creating positions that essentially replicate their duties undermines the expertise and contributions of our dedicated coaches and perpetuates a culture of undervaluing and underutilizing the talents of insights of our elementary teachers. It sends a clear message that their voices, experiences, and expertise are expendable, disposable, and inconsequential in the eyes of those in positions of power. They feel as if their voice has been silenced. But let me be clear, our elementary teachers are the heart and soul of our educational community. They teach and shape our youngest learners. Without their guidance, our littles won't be ready for middle or high school. They pour their hearts and souls into their classrooms daily, shaping our students' minds and hearts with passion, dedication, and love. They deserve to be valued, supported, heard, and uplifted in their professional journey, not relegated to the sidelines or overlooked in pursuing other initiatives. As we move forward, I implore you to join me in advocating for the reinstatement of our instructional coaches and the recognition and utilization of the expertise and talents of our elementary teachers. Let us stand together in solidarity, united in our commitment to creating a culture of support, collaboration, and empowerment that honors the contributions of every member of our educational community. Let us never forget our greatest strength lies in our collective wisdom, shared experiences, and unwavering commitment to our students' success and well-being. Together, let us strive to create a future where every member of our educational community is valued, supported, and empowered to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in person to make a public comment? Okay. Do we have anyone online? Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have several items on the consent agenda which will be addressed in a single motion to approve all of them. However, to simplify questions and discussions, we'll proceed through each category stepwise. So as I identify each group, please raise your hand, board members, if you'd like a clarification on any items. So we'll start with the minutes. Are there any problems or questions with the minutes? Okay. So we'll move on then to finance and personnel portion of the consent agenda. Are there any questions or concerns? There's, I know Dr. Pringle shared some information with the board about the apartment lease that we use for our LifeLink students, so that was really some helpful background information for those who are less familiar with that. And we have a number of material purchases. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
On the finance and personnel? Yeah. Go ahead.
7A. It's just really on page 3 in the beginning, when they said that there's no term fixed investment. Did you mean that? Because on the second page, electives, term investments, term fixed investments. I'm not sure what you meant by that. On page 3, right, the fixed term investment, the following schedule indicates as of January 31st, SCASI has no fixed term investments. And then on the next page, it shows, indicates the fixed term investments. So I don't know, I was a little confused when I was reading that.
First things first, try not to trip on my way up here. The no fixed term investments are in the general fund, where
Right.
our money market accounts
Right.
are currently holding, instead of we're using money market funds with a floor of 5% interest rates. So no matter what, right now, it's a guarantee
Right.
for a few more months that the general fund funds will have no fixed term investments, but they are invested in money market accounts. The next page I believe you're looking at is in regards to the capital reserve fund, and those do have fixed term
I
investments.
see, so they were separate, okay,
Yes.
because the maturity is like 2026, so.
Correct. We did fix in some of the capital reserve funds for longer periods of time to take advantage of those interest rates in case they would fall, as a guarantee is coming up in the next few months on the other ones.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Great. Anything else from finance and personnel? Okay, we can, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I put my hand up after you looked this direction. I wondered if someone wanted to just give a quick overview of the proposed substitute pay rate increase, because I feel like that's an important change that I'd like to highlight for the community.
Okay.
Thanks. Super quick. I know it's in there, but since it's at the end of an HR report and not its own separate thing, I'm not sure everybody would notice it.
So I forget, actually, no, it wasn't last year, 2 or 3 years ago, we implemented a progressive rate where if somebody has subbed for us for 20 days or more, then we pay them more per day. It's supposed to be an incentive to come. In analyzing the data on that, we have about between 50 and 70% of our subs are at the higher rate by February. So in order to encourage subs to actually come here, and doing a check with our neighboring districts who are paying between 100 and, I forget what the high number was, maybe 130. We just decided that paying everybody 120, A, would simplify it for administrative processing, and B, again, hopefully encourage people to be here day one.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, Ann.
As a follow-up to that, in terms of the rate for retirees, because I think the expertise of teachers, if after they retire and they can come back, is that equivalent in terms of other districts as well?
Yeah, most districts don't give more to retirees.
Oh, okay, I just want, thank you.
Okay. Anything else about substitutes or other items on the finance and personnel? Okay. At this time, then, we can move on to instructional programs. Mostly some routine approvals here. Any questions? Ann? That's okay. Peter has one, so we'll start there.
Yeah, I had a question, and actually, it was answered in email, but I thought it would be worthwhile if, I had asked about the IB program. I had asked a question because 21 of the 40 approvals are for the IB program, and that's happened before, and I've never seen, when I've been on the board, we've never rejected any of that. And so I had a couple of questions. Wow, we're going to get the whole, the cavalcade in defense of the IB program or something. Yeah, I think it was pretty straightforward. I had just asked, some of them, there are only 2, right? And then, so those get moved, and then there's a few that are 7, 8, and 9 that it looks like they will have their own course. But I asked about differentiated instruction in the class where they're put together. And quite honestly, if there's any guidance for the board, because if this keeps coming back, it's just a use of our time that I almost feel like speaking for myself, I don't know that I particularly feel compelled to need to review so many requests. And so could you just tell us a little bit?
So some of them could have staffing impacts, which is, I think, the intent of the class size policy, which is why we bring them to you for approval. The budget isn't passed till much later in June. We try to get our student scheduling done by the time they leave. So there's a kind of a mismatch in the time frame for us. So we may be going into the summer and the kids don't have an opportunity to pick a different class if it's not going to be run. They wouldn't know till July or August. So that's part of the timing. But I know what you're saying, and I think that we could probably brush up that administrative regulation because it is a little bit old. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if they're being put together and there's a way to handle it and the teacher knows how to do what needs to be done, then I guess, yeah, well, now you're making a face.
Well, yeah, co-seating is something that we've been doing for many of the courses. I would say it is a difficult sometimes for the teacher. They're teaching the one curriculum and they're adding on this extra layer within the same class. So it's not effortless, and I think some of our teachers feel a little fatigued sometimes by that.
I guess, though, that my feeling about this is that that's a decision that has to happen within the group of professionals who are managing the courses, the curriculum, and I almost feel like it is not my place to put my hand in there to determine a teacher's ability about their own capacities. If people aren't trained to do that, I mean, that's one thing, and we might want to go, well, do we need to encourage professional development? But I really feel like so much of the determination is much more, it should be entrusted to you than to me. I mean, I'm just not there.
These are just our recommendations for
Yeah.
you to say yay or nay to. We've done what you've said. We've worked with the people in the school, and these are our recommendations. There is one on the
But
list
I'm sorry.
that does require additional staffing.
Yeah, I guess that is but as a policy that we're, no, I understand it's a policy, which is why it's coming to us. And I think that what I'm getting at is that I wonder if that's a good policy where IB is concerned.
Well, I think to Chris's point, the biggest issue is because of the staffing impacts that it has, and the board is in control of the budget, and so it's just like if we had a request for another special ed teacher, there's a cost, and it will be an ongoing cost, potentially, not always with courses, but because things get shuffled sometimes year to year, but yeah, it's the repercussions for the budget is why it's in policy to come forward. Do you want
Yes, and this was, the policy was created before IB was put in place. This was also, this co-seating with other classes was a fix to get IB off the ground, okay? The hopes were that we were going to grow the program enough to have its own courses assigned to them. But given the numbers of students are so small, we are combining them with other courses. And we have teachers that are willing at this point to do that. It is a certain amount of tax that goes with that on our teachers because they're teaching the standards of two different courses in one course. So it's not an easy task. There's teachers that are willing to do that. But at some point, I think we're going to have to evaluate our numbers in that program.
I saw Debbie had her hand up, and I have another comment too.
Go ahead.
I guess just on that topic, I wanted to just point out to us the last three on the list. IB Theory of Knowledge Year 1 has only 8 students, and it says it would be co-seated with IB Theory of Knowledge Year 2, which also only has 8 students. So again, it does make me concerned about the future of the IB program if the foundational class is only drawing 8 students. So I just wanted to point that out. The one that does have staffing implications that I wanted to ask about or the last two IB math applications, HL year 1 and year 2, are those going to be co-seated, or are they two separate? So we're going to have a class for 4 students and a class for 8 students. And is that the 1/3 math teacher that's being proposed in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. So that puts that together. So anyway, that is part of why it has to come to the board, because we are being asked to consider a 1/3 position in order to support these classes of very, very small numbers of students.
Okay. Anne, did you have a question?
I was trying to understand in looking at this, the kind of dynamics of the pedagogy for co-seating. Like, I understand it for like journalism 2, where, you know, journalism 1, that seems relatively easy, but something like a upper level language course seems potentially more of a challenge. And so, but just trying to understand, I hear what you're saying and understand the expertise. And so it was really more of a basic question on my part to understand the dynamics of co-teaching and what that imposes on the teacher themselves.
So some of the courses we can co-seat if we feel the content is similar enough, and those are the only ones we co-seat.
Right.
So.
But like with a language level, does the fluency, like I assume with a upper level, you know, any kind of course, you like language course, the kind of fluency can then, that's what I believe makes or breaks, right? The kind of communication in the class. And so that just, that's a challenge that I am interested in.
It's really, the fluency would be similar. That's why we co-seated it in that particular level. It's more the internal and external assessments the students are taking
gotcha.
that the teacher has to prepare those students for specifically.
Gotcha, thanks.
Okay. Anything else about course numbers? Okay, thanks very much. Next, we have physical plant consent agenda. This includes our the loop field renovation on this campus to prepare for the addition on Mount Nittany. Oh, yeah. What? I'm sorry?
Instructional, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we just did an instructional program. That's okay.
Oh.
I've skipped some things earlier, so it's okay. Keep an eye on me. So anything from physical plant, cafeteria renovation for Mount Nittany, and some other repairs. Okay. And finally, we have policies. These are policies we reviewed previously and were seen by the board at a info discussion. Any questions? All right. So with that, I can call for a motion to approve the consent agenda with items 6 through 10 as presented.
So moved. Miller. Second.
Okay.
Colby.
That's been moved and seconded. Any last questions? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay. Board members voting aye, please raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Board members voting nay, raise your hand. Okay. So that item is passed. Next up, we have our action items. Agenda item 11A is a motion to approve the resolution affirming the fundamental tenets of Delta. This is marking their 50th anniversary, as shown in attachment 11A.
Buck, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Anderson, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? So we're very grateful of a committee that came out of the Delta as a School versus Program Committee that looked at foundational documents for Delta and shared a number of particular items that we then formatted into a resolution that lays out, foundational core parts of Delta that are still alive and today and help make Delta what it is. And then there's a section at the end that affirms the board's support for a number of the practices at Delta that help make it the unique program that it is today. So okay. Well, if we have no other questions or comment, do we have any public comment on this item? Okay. Board members voting aye, please raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Those voting nay? Okay, that item's passed. Agenda item 11B is a motion to approve the 2024-2025 proposed final budget as shown in attachment 11B.
Miller, so moved.
Buck, second.
That's been moved and seconded, and we have Mr. Brown and Mr. Vigilone joining us at the table. Were there a couple things that you potentially wanted to update on? Great.
30 seconds.
No, no worries. I get a little bit of our audio-visual stuff set up, and then we'll take a look at things.
Okay, thank you. Attached to your materials this evening has been a memo and then also a attachment of supporting financial statements and charts and examples. And then we also have a presentation. So we're just going to try to go through this and pick out the highlights, but please feel free to ask any questions. So tonight we are asking you to take action to approve the 24-25 proposed final budget. It must be voted upon within at least 30 days prior to the final budget. Final budget is scheduled for the first meeting in June. There were not 30 days between the first meeting in May, so this was the next available meeting date. I have some information in here to share with you that we normally provide through the budget process. Again, going to try very hard to summarize for you the high points. So we are including a 2.65% tax increase. In our out-year projections, the rate has increased, assuming a 3% in the following years. Earned in local revenue, our earned income tax revenue is trending slightly above budget. Realty transfer is trailing behind, and interest on investments is increasing significantly, both in the 24 and 25 year due to higher interest rates. State revenue is relatively flat, and federal has been increased slightly to reflect recent experience. And that would be beginning in 24-25, excuse me. Salaries and benefits, I want to try to point out some of the high points here. We have the new contracts have had an impact on the budget, and they've been defined. Several of our contracts were not settled last year until later in the budget process, so we have a more accurate understanding of those impacts. Reinstatement of the 1.0 DEIB position for secondary. This had been grant funded and ended in 22-23. Addition of a .33 math position, I believe that was mentioned earlier this evening. Addition of a 1.0 MTSS position funded by Title II. Repurpose 1.0 for retirements of instructional technology and elementary instructional coach is leading to 2.0 of FTE special education teachers. Create 2.0 FTE for elementary curriculum coordinators and a 1.0 special education teacher by repurposing the remaining 3.0 FTE elementary instructional coaches. And then increase in healthcare. That is an upcoming action item as well. We went through a vigorous process, and we are seeing our healthcare experience, since we are self-funded this year, go up by a projected $3.9 million, and that will lead us to 20.5 in 24-25. Changes in the projected expenses. AP testing is included at a cost of $45,000. That was an item that began this year through funding from our additional state revenue as a budget amendment. Expansion of the elementary writing curriculum program, addition of safety and security budget for $64,000, which thus also includes PBIS funding, increase in student substitute teacher employee rate, which you discussed earlier, reduction in charter school cost from the projections from the 23-24 budget. It is still going up slightly, but it's going up less than what we had projected. So some of that language may not always be easy to pick up. Our rate is going up because our budget is going up, and that our budget has an impact on the rate. Our number of students is reducing, and I'm just going to take this opportunity to do a sidebar. Number of students number of students decreasing. Many of those are coming back to the district. Many of those, like we are seeing in any enrollment of students coming into the district, higher special education rate, and so we are needing more special education teachers. Both this current year, there were additional teachers hired, as well as we're expecting to hire more for special education next year. Reduction and elimination of transfer for capital reserve and health insurance commitment fund balance, and then significant increase in contracted carrier costs. Those are our bus drivers that are not employees of the district. Just some notes on our district / grant funded positions. The positions included in the budget that were grant funded previously were 2 teachers. Two of our elementary coaches were partially funded by Title II revenue, and then the bilingual family liaison. Total district local expense in 24-25 is an additional $263,000 from those previously grant-funded positions. As of note, one mental health clinician position will remain grant-funded due to PCCD. And then, as listed on slide 5, 1.0 MTSS is funded by Title II. This is a pretty involved schedule that we are looking at our expenses by our budget head or department category with some explanations for you. I'm not going to go through those, but different examples. Again, additional notation for our budget. Staff comparison, and again, we're talking about 2.33 new positions, one of them being federally funded. But even just looking at our SCAA bargaining unit employees, you're probably wondering why 10 if we are only talking about 2.33. The 2.33 is for next year, but we're comparing beginning budget of the current year to beginning budget of next year. And there were some additions, like I said, 3 special education teachers and some other teachers that were funded by additional state funding, or new teachers because of student enrollment that needed to be added after the original budget for last year was approved. So that's the difference there. So we have budget to budget comparison for that. So our total budget, beginning fund balance, unassigned fund balance is expected to be right around $15.7 million. Revenue of 197 and change. And then we end with our expenses about $203 million, and ending unassigned fund balance of $13.3 million, which is just a little bit under 7% of our operating budget, which we can max out at 8%. One of the questions that I have received in the last week is, can the district have an unbalanced budget to start the year? The answer is yes. That's why you have fund balance sometimes. In fact, some of the school districts that I follow repeatedly have an unbalanced budget whenever it is approved. This is not a common thing for us, but it is something that we're going to continue to try to correct between now and when we present the final budget at the beginning of June. There's still, although you're we're asking you to approve a proposed final budget, that there still can be changes to the final budget when it's presented and you approve it. That feedback can come to from you tonight. It can come from you at one of the May meetings. Man, I got my months wrong there. As well as some recommendations that we would make through our further analysis of the budget that we expect to happen over the next several weeks. Detail by line item of the different components of revenue and then of expense. And I'm going to turn things over to Joe to give you continued highlights of our presentation.
Okay, starting with this slide, this is giving an update as to how we've moved throughout the budget process and where we are migrating towards on the revenues and then to the expenditures and transfers. This is just basically as it's been built. Each time we've changed it or updated you, we've given you this schedule with the reasons for the increases or the decreases in the line items. And then we get into more detailed revenue by source. So you can see 80% of the revenue is coming from local sources within the district, the remaining 20% from federal and state combined. And of the 80%, the local revenue, you can see 75% of the local revenue comes from real estate taxes. And that actually makes up 61% of total revenue going to the district is real estate taxes. For the state revenue on that side, your two largest components, which make up about 70%, are the basic ed subsidy and then the revenue for retirement. That's a reimbursement that is obtained from the PSERS. It's 50% match. And then from the federal revenue, the largest portion is the Title I revenue. The ESSER funds have rolled off of this. It was a much larger number in the past few years, but it's now going back to historic levels. So doing a tax rate comparison, this schedule, it shows the dotted blue line is what the tax actually has done the past 4 years, and then also what we're projecting this year, 2.65. So you can see the lines begin to intersect again. Had a 2% tax increase started and been done the whole way since the beginning of COVID. For the 2 years after COVID, the tax increase was held at 0%, as the economy got back on a solid footing. But even if you're increasing at the Act 1 index or a little more this year, it's just back to a catch-up of what a past 5-year increase of 2% would have been. These are functional expense categories as defined by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We utilize this for the next slide, which gives you the functional expenses across this side in terms of where the effort is going between regular instruction, other instructional, special programs, support services, and various other. You can see the percentages between the budget years are very stable. Moving on to the expenses by function, this is just a further breakdown. You can see by far the largest portion is instructional, followed by support services. They comprise 87% of the budget. And then on the instructional side, you can see it's regular and special programs combined to make about 93% of the budget. Support services, as you can see, the largest portion of that is operation of physical plant. And then followed up, you can see it's administrative support, support for central services, student services, and then student transportation. These are the things to make the district work, enhance and provide the classroom in the space. And then the other expenses and financing use, you can see 3/4 of that is related to the debt service that is existing on the books. Budget expense by object. This was one of the first things I looked at when I started here, and noting that 73% of the costs pertain to personnel costs. So the district, what are you buying? Largely people. And then at the same time, at 9% is debt service, paying off, the buildings and the different things that have been done over the years. That's 82 cents on the dollar right there is the personnel costs, the teachers, the administrators, everybody involved in the district, and the debt service on the buildings to house the people to, run the classes. Randy got into charter school information earlier. This is just to show and enhance his point that it's not students that are increasing, it is the rate and the tuition rate that is increasing based upon the calculation with the budget. And here is, the next slide is the students, and you can see a decrease by a substantial margin over the past 2 years. This was a chart shown to you last time, and if you, at the last meeting by the special education presentation, you can see special education enrollment has grown from 779 students in 2020 to 915 in 2023. That is a 17.5% increase in 3 years. That is substantial. And then going forward, this is the committed the usage of fund balance. And if you're looking at the orange line and paying attention to that, it's not going in a direction we want it, but we'll keep continuing to work out to make that a little flatter. But if you follow from the top of the lines at the beginning of this in 2021, 2022 to the bottom of the lines in 2033, 2034. That is the orange line that you saw on the previous page. And then we have a couple slides with the supplemental tax rebate, which is in its 10th year and is still being utilized significantly, but at the same time, it has been declining over the past few years. I have a stack over there to review right now, which makes me believe that it's going to bump up in 24 as compared to where it was in 23 and perhaps even 22. So from then, it's the next steps that we are looking at going forward with, and that is a budget update at your May 6th meeting. And then May 14th, the district will publish a notice of intent to adopt the final budget. The board meeting and budget hearing will be on May 20th with again, a notice of intent. I think we've got that in there twice. I apologize, should be on the 24th. Then a committee of the whole on June 3rd for board action to adopt the final budget, the homestead farmstead exclusion resolution, the annual tax levy resolution, and the installment payment plan resolution, with a deadline to submit the 24-25 budget on Form PDE 2028 occurring on July 15th.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Dr. Kravicore.
Thank you so much for a very detailed and very organized presentation. I really appreciated that. And actually, when I first went through the budget, I didn't have any questions until I got to Dr. Klinsman Title II funding plan. And then I went back to review the MTSS teacher, which is so will be funded by the Title II. Did I misunderstand? I know he's going to be presenting it, but I just wanted to have an idea. Is that correct? Could you still fund the MTSS teacher with Title II?
Yes, absolutely. It's an allowed purpose under Title II, and that's the reason for the recommendation.
Okay, so I guess when I hear his presentation, maybe he'll clear up that, because that seemed to be like a contradiction from what he wrote for his information.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the budget? Yeah.
It's always me.
It's okay.
I just wanted to maybe point out a couple of things. I'm not sure as much if they're questions or just saying it for the benefit of the public. One thing that I didn't catch sort of in my first read through, but I saw as we were going through it quickly tonight, is another thing that was formally funded by ESSER funds was the Champs Camp? Or
expanded Champs Camp.
Okay, expanded, and so that makes more sense. I was like, well, we must have had it before.
We did.
Okay.
Yes, we expanded it.
Okay.
Because of need and because of funding opportunity.
Right, and so are we keeping it at the expanded level, or are we going back?
It's being retracted, yes.
Okay, so that's good to know. I guess a question, if we are approving a third of a math teacher position because we have this need for these two specific courses, but if those courses are again undersubscribed next year and we say, you know what, we're not going to offer the classes, like, can that position then be retracted? Or once we put it on the books, it's there forever?
Well, it would, the course or the position?
The position.
Position, it would, it's going to be in addition to a .67 person or position currently.
It's permanent.
Okay.
So,
That wasn't clear. I didn't know if we were literally hiring a third of a person to just come in
which we do
part-time and
sometimes.
teach.
Yeah.
Right? That's not impossible. So that's how I had read that information.
Yeah,
Okay.
this would be added to a .67.
Okay.
But,
So-
so yes and no. We can, when you have turnover, you can do some retraction as well.
Okay. And then I just think it's important to point out, like, I know it's unusual for us to put forward a budget that is not balanced, right, and has a projected deficit, but like half of that projected deficit is in fact covered by the use of the debt service fund. And so I just wanted to say that out loud, because yes, that's in there in the slide, but it's not in like the first, or maybe it's not in the memo that says, hey, this is what the total costs are and this is what the total revenues are. And when you're having a heart attack over the difference in the numbers, that difference gets cut in half when you remember that some of that is going to be paid for by the debt service fund. So I thought that was important to point out. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'd add too that we don't know the governor's budget yet. And so I'm sure that, I know Randy and I'm sure Joe probably also is pretty conservative about not over counting those chickens before they're hatched. And so that may affect, what our general fund budget is. The one thing I wanted to add, and then I'll get to other questions, was just to comment on the charter school funding. I know that the special ed student rate has stayed pretty stable, but as you mentioned, the tuition rate goes up as our budget goes up. And I want to specifically note the special ed rate is a flat rate. It is not tiered, which is what we have from the state. We get tiered reimbursement from the state for special ed based on our costs. And charter schools do not have costs-based special ed tuition. So if they have low-cost special ed students, they still get the maximum special ed rate, which impacts our funding and budget. So, Jackie, did you have something else to add?
No, I just would add that, while we don't know what the budget is in the state of Pennsylvania yet, that there's no way our allotment from the state will go down. And so when we project the budget, we just keep it flat. But there is a lot of hope that our numbers will go up slightly and that there might be some other cost-saving measures taken at the state level. So that's just something else that will also play into the final budget that we're not counting on at this point.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. We don't typically go down. We're always usually wherever. Yeah, right. Yeah, Aaron.
So I just had a question kind of as a new board member. I suspect Ann and Dan will have a similar question. I see that the budget you've presented assumes a 2.65% tax increase and then subsequent tax increase year after year of 3%. How do we decide that? How do we decide what that, because I think Act 1 goes higher than that. Don't get scared. I'm not saying we should go higher. I'm just saying I'm just curious how do we decide that? And do we get a recommendation? And then, yeah.
So you're getting a recommendation for next year to be 2.65. The out-year projections are just what they are, projections. They're our best estimate given what we know and what we don't know about what it would take for additional revenue. But we'll just wait and see. And if we would go back and look at many other years, the actual and the projected increases are not always the same. And so this is just what we know at this point in time.
Yeah, so historically, the finance office says this is what we suggest using for projections. When it starts to get out of alignment, which happened several years ago, then there were conversations between the finance office and the board about their recommendation to go to 2.5% and the projection ongoing years. And so there was an adjustment like that, and this is similar to that. That's partly the reason why Joe had that chart about since COVID when we had 0. Typically up until that point, we had been working with a 2% projection rate for the tax increase. And so that was Joe's demonstration that if we had not dropped to 0 and we had stayed at our typical historic 2% rough increase where we would have been, and the fact that we went 0 for 2 years and then had a bigger increase, we came back to exactly where we anticipated that we would be. So that was really helpful. I think that was important information for the public to see that how that played out. And that was our hope to do just that and not overshoot. So
Does
that make sense?
I think so, yeah. And then we pass that tax increase as part of the budget, or is that a separate?
When we pass the final budget.
When you pass the final budget, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so it varies year to year. Sometimes we've asked for 2 different projections for the tax rate as we get closer. It depends on kind of what's going on that year and what questions we might have. Yeah, Jackie?
I don't need this information tonight, but I'd be really interested to see the charter school breakout between cyber charter and brick and mortar charter.
Sure.
Just to see those numbers. So at some point, there's no rush.
Enrollment.
Enrollment numbers, yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. Yeah, Gretchen.
I was just going to add to what Amy said in answering Aaron's question. How does the board give input to picking this number? And exactly what Amy said, but I'm just going to emphasize it because for new board members, I don't know if it's clear. But so Randy will give the board 3 different rates throughout the budget process. So how we see these iterations over and over and over, and then through conversation and just going back and forth with Randy, it kind of gets to the point where then Randy makes the recommendation. But we're looking at like usually 3 different ones throughout, and then we end up coming to the conclusion of the one that we get recommended from Randy by. So I just thought I would add that. But I have one other thing, but Aaron looks like he wants to. Oh, you don't? Okay. I just had a question. And I'm just wondering, so do we have any idea why special education enrollment increased by 17.5%? I mean, as Joe said, that's pretty significant, but
I think,
why?
well, it was discussed at the audit that we did the last meeting.
Can you remind me?
Well, I mean, they didn't have specific answers. I know with certain buildings, they talked about a little bit that they would be investigating. Like, there was one particular building that had a really notable increase, and so they were going to do some investigating as to why that happened and have some conversations and look into that. So, I mean, yeah.
I can also say, our preschool numbers coming in, like
Right.
for next year's incoming class, I believe there are 42 incoming with IEPs, 31 of them with already diagnosed autism or autism-like characteristics. So I do not know if it's COVID, but I can tell you entering our schools each year, we're seeing an increase. We will be getting data to you at one of the upcoming presentations, board work sessions, that did say the preliminary data we pulled out of 151 students that we're identifying that are Black, Hispanic, or multi-race, 54 were move-in. So almost 50% had a move-in rate already with an IEP of that marginalized population. They come to us, we've got to honor that IEP. So there are also a lot of move-ins. So that's some of the things that we're working with the special education department. We will make sure that we gather since COVID or since 2019, the incoming kindergarten to show those statistics as well.
Yeah, and I would point out too that I think due to the impacts of COVID, I just think societally parents are much more vigilant, I think, and have gained a lot more knowledge about what to look out for in younger ages too. So, I mean, there's always conversations in any medical diagnosis, are you seeing increasing rates because there's an impact of something happening, or are you're better at diagnosing it, you're better at recognizing it, and so your rates are going up because you actually are identifying it at the proper times and early. So I think there's multiple factors probably at play as to why we're seeing escalation.
Yeah, I do too. I was just curious if there's been an obvious feeling that teachers are getting, or, I was particularly curious about, are we starting, because these kids that you were just referring to are the kids that were really young, right? And acquiring language, for example, during COVID. So I think we had always sort of guessed that we would see the long-term ramifications, and I'm wondering if this may be some of the long-term ramifications of what they experienced during those formative years, and then also linking it back to Randy and Joe, that those things cost money, and we had thought about that and discussed that for a while. So it's sort of a sad thought, but this is it coming into real life now after having lived through those early years. If you had a baby or a toddler, we're seeing some of the impacts, maybe not conclusive.
Yeah, I would
maybe.
wonder too about our move to more explicit instruction and the MTSS model. So I think that also lends itself to identifying students earlier, whereas sometimes students with specified learning disabilities were often left, and this is not just us as a district, but I think often those particular ones, sometimes they don't always get identified quite as early because there's an expectation they're just a little delayed, they'll catch up. And I think our new processes are much better at identifying some kids that may be struggling that wind up falling into the special ed category. So I think there's a lot of...
And there's also more now.
There's a lot of little things at play potentially that lend itself to that.
Because of COVID. But anyway, I think I interrupted you, Danielle. Were you going to? Okay.
No, I was just saying, we've talked about that, not officially, but they were one. So the incoming kindergarten class would have been approximately 1 year old during COVID. We're not sure either. We're going to have to continue to look at the trends with the preschools.
Yeah.
And this is why we had to look really hard at our personnel and figure out where our strongest needs are, which is why we're hiring more special education teachers, why we're looking at a MTSS position, why back in the day we created MTS interventionists for the middle schools. So all these are support systems that will support that group of students.
Other questions?
Joe has the answer.
Oh, sure.
Luckily, I found an email from Donna. There are 69 students in cyber schools right now, charter schools, and the remainder are in the brick and mortar.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Last call for questions. Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item? Okay. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Those voting nay. All right, that item is passed. Next up, we have agenda item 11C, a motion to approve an agreement with Highmark Blue Shield from 2024 to 2027, as shown in attachment 11C. So I think Randy's going to stay with us and share some information on this.
Just want to share that we had a, what I would call a successful our request for proposal process. We ended up with Highmark coming to the table in a good fashion. We are very pleased that we don't have to endure a change, not only administratively, but also for our employees with a change to their health care. Would we have liked to have seen it better? Obviously, yes. But obviously, since we are self-funded, we pay for our claims. We did do that analysis to ensure that it wasn't more productive or cost-effective for us to go back to being fully insured. But so we will continue with a self-funded plan. Highmark will be assessing us an administrative fee and then also costs for stop-loss insurance based upon the rates in this proposal document.
Questions? Go ahead, Deb.
I just want to clarify something because in the memo at the end, it says in 2021, the district established a healthcare reserve, right, which we are aware of. The reserve helps to offset the cost of high claim years with stop loss coverage. So are we saying that we're paying for the stop loss coverage out of the reserve or?
No, that's
okay.
not. That's
I
not
didn't
what's-
think so,
no.
but that's what I was
Sorry.
reading that sentence to mean.
No, that's not what
Okay.
that means. And I will take this moment in time to say also that we, as we mentioned, we won't be funding any additional healthcare reserve this year as we had planned, but we aren't using any either. Even though we had such a high claim year, we believe that we'll have fund balance to help cover that. But in the future years, depending on how the trends work, we may need to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Aaron,
Do we need a motion to approve the Highmark Blue Shield agreement?
if we're done with questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't know if Deb had any others. Was that all you had, Deb?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, then yes.
So moved, Miller.
Second, Colby.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, board members in favor, say aye.
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 Those not in favor, say nay. I still can't get a rhythm down to how to do this voice voting, but we'll get there. Next up, we have agenda item 11D, is a motion to approve a traffic study at the new Park Forest Middle School site. This is shown in attachment 11D.
Buck, so moved.
Miller, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? So this is basically we're trying to get this traffic study done before Penn State gets out of school, so it's reliable and accurate, which is really important in our community. So that's why it's presented as a not to exceed number, because all the details aren't quite worked out, but we anticipate being under that benchmark. No questions? Any public comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, board members in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that's the word I've been searching for. Opposed, say nay. All right, that item is passed. That concludes our action items for this evening. We'll move on to information reports. We'll have Ms. Yoder and Mr. Brown and Dr. Klingeman with us to provide an update on a proposed attendance boundary area change.
Rehearsed real well. Go ahead.
He just set me up. Apparently, he's been up here long enough tonight. We've been working very closely lately on a lot of different things. And as you know, we recently approved an alternate attendance area between Radio Park and Park Forest Elementary School. And we are working through that currently with registration. This is an information item tonight to bring to the table a similar proposed attendance boundary, but it is definitely more unique with regards to an actual permanent change that would take the area of Duff Drive or White Course Apartments that is actually in near existence to Coral Street, move that stop to Coral Street beginning next year. What that is going to do is also be able to provide ESL services at Coral, which we currently do not have. Currently, we have 4 hubs, Radio Park, Park Forest, Spring Creek, and Easterly Parkway. This would add a 5th and make that a permanent school for ESL. So by moving those students who currently attend Easterly and other students that don't qualify for ESL but do live at that pickup spot, we could also bring back the current students that are assigned to Coral Street because they live in that residential area, but they are bused to Radio Park to receive ESL services. So it would impact the middle school. That information is within there, and that was what we were bringing forward tonight to see if there are questions or what you would like us to do moving forward.
So this is a no-cost proposal as far as teaching staff, because right now there are 1.5 teaching positions at Radio Park and 1.5 at Easterly, and so one person would stay at Radio Park, one would stay at Easterly, and one would move to Coral Street. The numbers would be fairly comparable, not necessarily total, with what we know. Obviously, this population can fluctuate as far as in and out in the district, and obviously then where they live can change as well. And as was suggested to us as we were putting the proposal together, hopefully you find the summary of changes on page 2 of the document to bring some clarity to the proposal for the next 2 years.
Yeah, Dan.
So I was reading through and I just would like a little clarity. So current students on White Course that live in 5th grade.
So current 2000, like this school year,
This school year, they're in
4th graders
4th graders going into 5th.
would be going into 5th is what we have offered them, that they could stay at their home school next year.
Okay.
So since they have pretty much had their entire career there.
But after that, they will move to Park Forest Middle instead of Mount Nittany Middle, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. And then I noticed that the 6th, 7th, 8th graders that are in Mount Nittany Middle now, some of them will transition to Park Forest Middle, or no, they stay there?
They're currently at Mount Nittany Middle. We would like to propose that they stay there.
Okay.
They're adolescents. They've already established themselves at a middle school. So we would continue that until those students have
Okay.
moved through. But once this move, future students, so there will be buses coming to that stop going to Mount Nittany and Park Forest for the next
2
couple of
years.
years.
For 2 years, because it would be this year's 6th and 7th grade. So next year they'd be in 7th and 8th, and then the next year they'd be just the 8th grade.
Okay.
So it would be just 2 years that we make that transition.
Thank you.
Okay. Ann?
There are 3 places where transportation is mentioned in the memo. Is there going to be transportation costs associated with that?
Very minimal. The most transportation cost would be maintaining the route from Whitehorse to Mount Nittany, and then also an additional bus from Whitehorse to Park Forest. The bus that is currently picking up students at Whitehorse and taking them to Easterly has the capacity to just swing by Coral Street, drop off some kids, and then take for that 1 year of fifth graders back to Easterly. So that's very minimal.
Yeah, gotcha. Good question. Yeah, Jackie?
So I just wanted to clarify that I read this the way it's intended, but and didn't mishear what you just said answering Dan's question. So rising 7th and 8th graders in this area who are going to Mount Nittany will have the option to stay at Mount Nittany or go to Park Forest, or will they stay at?
They would have
They'll have the option.
They'd have the option, obviously. And some of that, I think that we said that they would stay at Mount Nittany, but what we really meant was they would have the option to stay at Mount Nittany or go to Park Forest. There is, I believe right now, 1, maybe 2 families that could have some sibling issues that as the siblings rise into higher grades, the families may choose to make the move so that they don't have 2 kids in middle school in the different middle schools at the same time. But I think it's 1, maybe 2 families.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Peter.
The students going to Coral Street, their walk is kind of funky.
They won't walk, there'll be a transportation.
There'll be a transportation. All right, cool. That's what I was wondering.
Yep. Yeah, no, they wouldn't be crossing 26.
Yeah, there you go.
We care about our kids too much.
Yeah.
Speaking of busing, I'm thinking about not necessarily this neighborhood, but the students who are receiving their ESL services at Radio Park, right? But they live in the Coral Street catchment. Will that have a busing impact? Like that's bringing some students back to Coral? Is that an entire, like is that currently one bus that picks up that group of kids and takes them to Radio Park? Will they maybe be able to just, fit on?
You're asking a really detailed
I
question.
know, right? But I didn't
because-
think about it before.
I want to say it might be multiple,
I can answer that, Danielle. I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I want to apologize. I'm actually at the Department of Federal Programs annual conference for professional development right now, so I apologize I can't be there in person. One of the challenges that we have with our ESL hubs is that students are actually coming to their home school first and then taking another bus. So they're actually losing instructional time. So this will actually bring back kids who live in the Coral Street area to not have to take multiple buses, and we'll cut down actually on some of the lost instructional time as well.
That's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, Gretchen.
I just had a question about, I'm thinking about the families that live in this area who right now think, or when they bought their house, they were under the impression that their kids would be going to one middle school, and then if this happens, they will be going to the other one. And I just don't want to be stopped in the grocery store with somebody going, well, why on earth did I not know this? So I'm just curious, or maybe it's not a comment, maybe it's not a question, it's a comment, but we don't want that. We don't want people to be surprised.
Understood, but they're not buying a house on Whitehorse Apartments on Duff Drive.
That's true.
That's all student housing. And as far as other families that bought in Coral Street, they would have been assigned, if they hadn't had the need for ESL services, it would have been their home school anyways. So I understand your concern. I think it's less of an issue in this situation because of those 2 facts. Does that make sense?
It does. So how is this communicated to them though?
I can jump in again.
Yep, go ahead,
So
Jonathan.
I'm working closely with the ESL teachers who are also in support of this idea. I can tell you that one of the challenges that we have learned, especially with our rising EL population, is the concern that families are not within quick driving distance or quick accessibility of some of their home school where they're getting ESL support. So this is going to be an opportunity to bring them home. The ESL teachers feel that there is an opportunity to be more equitable, and we do not want our families, especially our marginalized EL families, to have to choose whether to opt out of services to stay at their home school or to go to another school in order to receive ELD support. So this is the first step in my kind of vision that we've talked about earlier about closing our centers as well, so that students aren't forced to have to opt out to receive ESL support. But the ESL teachers and I have been talking and working on the communication and plans of how we can communicate this. I will say this, Gretchen, to your question and follow up, those Duff Drive families, they are a transient population. This may not even by middle school affect them because their families are only here for a short time getting an advanced degree, and then they move on to another location.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Other questions?
So we'd like to bring this back for action at a future meeting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So,
Thank you.
yep. Okay, thank you, everyone. Dr. Klingeman and Ms. Yoder are going to stick with us to provide an overview of the 2024-2025 Title II funding plan.
Thanks, everybody. Again, I apologize I can't be there in person. I tried to be as clear in the memo without going into a lot of the specifics of the federal language and some of the things, but I wanted to kind of explain the recommendation that's in front of you this evening. So for several years, CASD has been doing what's known as supplanting, which is using federal funds in the place of local funds if the federal funds were not there. So Mr. Brown spoke a little bit earlier about 1.5-ish, and it's varied depending on the cost of salary and benefits, et cetera, of instructional coaches that have been paid for historically out of Title II. At our most recent monitoring, which is a cyclical monitoring that happens every 4 years, and sometimes it happens even more often depending on big changes in finances, overturning of different people in the district that manage federal funds, et cetera. The discussion was about how we were supplanting that position. And what that really means is that Title II is a supplement, not supplant federal regulation that has to be, again, supplemental. So at that point, the district, if those federal dollars would ever disappear, there would not be a position funded by the local school district at that point. So another example would be that if the district had been paying for all 4 instructional coaches out of the local budget, then Title II needs to be used for something more on top of that. So because of that piece, we received a corrective action to discuss how better to fix that position and what we needed to do, because you don't really want to turn away federal funds. So knowing that this money is intended to come, we wanted to kind of bring something forward that would meet the new federal expectations, especially with new requirements that are coming down from USDE in terms of relying on tiers of evidence, as well as What Works Clearinghouse, and ensuring that all of these things are aligned. Part of all this is that's also a challenge that I've been working with the district on for a couple of years now, is that Title II is also, of all of the federal ESSA grants, the one that is easiest to cut, and it is always never in the original budget, and then usually comes back around by spring. So at that point, ensuring that we have a supplemental position in the budget is important. And in fact, we just heard today that it finally did come back in for the federal budget for next year. So the MTSS position has to be either district-wide, or it needs to support your highest need Title I schools. So at that point, as we're taking a look at K-12 MTSS rollout and all of the different pieces that come in with what our evidence-based interventions and supports at our elementary, with our collaborative work with the Pennsylvania Technical Assistance Network, and what we're working on in terms of transition between elementary to middle and middle school to high, having our Title II funds to be able to support the entire district from a K-12 lens, especially on some of the other large professional development requirements that we now have under Chapter 49, including structured literacy and et cetera. So the goal of this position will be, again, to really assist with the program requirements, including meeting the expectation for program goals and ensuring that we have ongoing and sustained professional development around literacy, multi-tiered systems of support, evidence-based literacy and resources and practice, as well as data analysis and et cetera. So those are kind of some of the main reasons of bringing the position to you kind of today. and I can take any other questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, Carlene?
So going back to my question, if you could clear that up for me, just to make sure that I understand correctly. So the Title II funding, can it be used for MTSS teacher instead of a program?
So programs and staffing can be defined in many different ways. So when I say a program, we're creating a program out of Title II, which would include professional development related to multi-tiered systems of support and literacy. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes into availability of Title II funding. For example, a school district can actually use Title II funding for class size reduction, for induction programs, for gifted education. There's a lot of resources and supports that Title II can be used for, but again, you are limited into how you can use them. So again, it's either going to be in a district-wide framework, or you have to use it specifically at our highest need schools. So it would almost be like creating one instructional support or professional development position, however you want to define it, only at, for example, Easterly and Mount Nittany, and the other schools would not have any other resources. We want to continue trying to show alignment of our MTSS tiers. And as we continue to ensure that the transition from elementary to middle school, specifically related to literacy interventions, for example, are there, this type of position will allow us to be more supportive of classrooms, schools, principals' needs at not only the elementary, but the middle school and the high school. So yes, and I do work collaboratively with our regional coordinator, and I'm actually was with her today talking about this exact piece to ensure that we would be okay. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Peter?
I'm just not sure what the answer to Carlene's question was.
I think it's about where that position is. So if that position is supporting Mount Nittany and Easterly because they're considered the high need schools, then that's part of what makes it eligible. That's
Yeah,
my understanding.
But I'm trying to. So, Ms. McGowan came before us and objected to this position. Am I
correct?
Right? Okay. So what I'm trying to understand is trying to understand some of her objection, and apparently on behalf of SCAEA, that this position interferes with a way that it's been done previously, and I'm trying to reconcile whether this works better and why. And just say it in the most plain English possible, because I don't need a 38-paragraph response.
Danielle, you want to do it?
I can, yes. So this can be used district-wide, K to 12.
Okay.
The instructional coaches were K to 5.
Right.
There were 4, but 2 of them were paid out of this money. So federal government considers that supplanting. So we're not really going above and beyond with our professional development needs, because we had 2 of them in our marginalized schools, but we also had 2 covering, so all schools were covered. So when we got audited, they came back and said, you can't use them this way.
Right.
What can we use? So we're trying to move forward with a full comprehensive MTSS system K-12. We've shared we're not there yet. We're getting better, but that's really, when you look at MTSS, you're looking at what's happening in the classroom for all students, and then for those students who need a little bit extra, who's supporting those, and what do those interventions look like, clear down to advanced tiers with special education. So this can provide professional development in overall MTSS systems of evidence-based practices to support the district with the needs, instead of the 8 buildings of elementary supporting classrooms or more or less strictly coaching.
So continuing the way that we've been doing it would keep us in violation.
Correct.
Okay, which would mean that it would get killed.
We had to move away from the way we were funding. Yes, we were already last year had a finding, correct, that we had to come back and say, we will make this change to receive this money.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, Gretchen?
So, that was my understanding, what Peter just said out loud in a simple sentence. So, because the positions in the, at the elementary level that Ms. McGowan referred to, the curriculum coordinators, is that what they were called?
So
At the
there's
elementary level?
So there's several positions. So Jackie Saylor was hired as the assistant curriculum K-12 director when Mrs. Merritt became the supervisor. Then we had 4 instructional coaches.
Instructional coaches, that's the
Yes.
term that I forgot. Okay.
Yes.
At the elementary level.
Correct. They
Okay.
were strictly at the elementary level.
Okay, instructional coaches. So so my question is, because we were in violation, and so that had to change how those positions are funded, it sounds like from what Ms. McGowan said, those positions were eliminated.
We added, we did change, keep in mind from the budget tonight. You want to talk?
Go ahead.
I can. So this is where we added in, so with the elimination of those positions, we are hiring 3 special education teachers and I forget what 2 curriculum coordinators. Because remember, there was also an ITC coach, instructional technology coach, that we are going to be hiring to make those 5 positions. 2 are retiring. So we have an elementary instructional coach that is retiring and a instructional technology coach that is retiring. But we are using those positions and that funding for special education and the elementary curriculum coordinator, which they are posted. They have not been hired for yet. But they will also be used in the elementary schools next year. 2 coordinators.
And there were 4 instructional coaches?
There were 4 instructional coaches.
And there'll be 2
curriculum coordinators.
curriculum coordinators.
Correct.
So is all the work that the 4 were doing before, it's going to be able to get done to support the elementary teachers just with this new configuration?
So take this position and remove it. This is really to support federal programming. So think of Dr. Klingeman and Title II funding and how it can be used to support really all students in an MTSS. The curriculum coordinators will work under Chris Merritt to focus on all levels of curriculum. So they are different roles than the instructional coaching positions as were in the past.
So I guess I'm pointing out what Ms. McGowan pointed out, but if those 4 were supporting elementary teachers before, then, who's going to do that now, or how does that work get done? But,
So we'll be supporting them in different ways. For example, in secondary, we support our teachers using our coordinators at the secondary level. Middle school 6 through 12. We'll be supporting our elementary teachers in the same way with 2 coordinators and our curriculum curriculum directors. So that we'll be supporting them in a different way than we have in the past. And in doing so, we're repurposing positions in order to facilitate our special education population growth and needs. So that's what we're doing.
no, I'm just glad that we clarified that and you said it out loud, because it sounds like they'll still be supported, which is better than eliminating those positions and them in the future not being supported. So I think it's good to just clarify. So thank you both.
Other questions on this item? Okay. We'll move on to policies. We'll be joined by Ms. Pierce to provide an update on several policy recommendations coming from the policy committee. Good evening.
Good evening again. So we start off our policy discussion with 251, which is homeless students. It's a policy that we had to update because the regulations have been, well, more, I don't know if more specific's the right word, but the regulations, federal regulations, have incorporated a different, more inclusive definition of homeless children. So we've done that. This is PSBA language. And, oh yes, I also meant to say thank you to Cindy Surgeon and Jean Canals for helping us with this as well. And again, the language that you see here that is new is all suggested by PSBA and is in accordance with
Our federal requirements.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep, so that's the basics on that one. Any concerns on that one? If not, we'll bring that back for voting next meeting.
Okay, the next one we'll look at is Policy 309. We are recommending that we retire this policy. As you may remember, we have the 300 policies, the 400 policies, the 500 policies, and we're squishing them all into 300s. This information on assignment and transfer is already included in 304. So we're recommending that we retire 309, and this would also retire 509.
Yep. So it's just eliminating redundancy.
Bingo.
Okay, great. So we can bring that back for action as well.
Then we have Policy 323, which has some updated language in it, again provided by PSBA. And thank you, Jean Canals, for helping us review this and make sure that it makes sense for SCASD.
Yeah, and this is another one collapsing all those levels. Any questions on this one? It's pretty detailed. Okay, we can bring that one back next time as well.
I like this. Then we have Policy 324, right?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Then we have Policy 324. Again, it's an update to talk about personnel files. There is frequently confusion among employees as to where their official file is. It's in the Human Resources Office. Some of it's electronic, some of it's paper. Maybe by the time my grandchildren retire, it'll all be electronic.
Yeah, and some clarifications about Title I
And some
positions.
clarifications on Title I, yes.
Any questions for this one? Okay.
Next, we have Policy 330, overtime. Again, this is a result of condensing 300, 400, 500, and just updated the language a little bit to make sure we're clear that obviously we need to be in accordance with federal and state laws, but we also have 3 bargaining unit contracts, as well as some employee handbooks that we have to take into account as well.
And I think there was a question at Policy Committee about how we know when somebody's overtime, and I think you shared that's basically in the bargaining unit stuff. Like when...
You mean when somebody's worked overtime?
When they're eligible for overtime.
When they're eligible for overtime is a combination of both federal state law, which are both the same, as well as what's in their bargaining unit agreement. For example, there's specific language in the AFSCME agreement. If somebody works 7 days straight, they get double time on Sunday. That has nothing to do with the Fair Labor Standards Act. That has to do with something the district negotiated with AFSCME decades ago.
Right. So that's why I just wanted to clarify for the board, there's parts of both. So there's meeting the federal requirements, and then there's also in some cases where we've negotiated certain things about overtime with bargaining units. So that would just apply as that changes. Any questions about anything else about that for board members? Okay, we'll bring that one back for action as well.
And our last one for tonight is 625 procurement cards. This is a new policy. It's been suggested by PSBA that we have a procurement card policy. And our finance people absolutely agreed, so here's the policy.
Yeah, so this is details about when staff are carrying essentially a credit card on behalf of the district and paying for certain needs. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. So who are the people, and what is a permissible charge?
Well, that is, where'd you go? That is something that is communicated to anybody who's issued a district card by the finance office. Oh, here he is. And you can talk better about exactly what communications you have. It's not only at time of issuance. There's also a budget refresher in August at the beginning of the school year, right? And is there anything else?
So when you're talking about an authorized purchase, you're talking about a purchase that fits within the constraints of the budget and is for something that should be allowable for purchasing for the district, and you are empowered to go do that. It is not going out on your own and deciding, I'm going to go do this, and not checking anything else with, let's say, a supervisor or anything along that lines.
Mm-hmm.
So the cards are maintained in the accounting office, but they are distributed out to the different buildings, and the different people have them within there, and they are expected, and they're reconciled monthly by the accounting department, and they're expected with the charges to make sure that they fit within what would be expected for the charges from those various people utilizing the cards.
So, I mean, I do understand P cards, but but like designated employees is, I guess, totally whoever you want them.
Well, Mr. Johnson has one.
Be. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense.
The principals, the directors.
Coaches. Debbie thought, sorry, not to put you on the spot here.
An example is the athletics department has P cards.
Correct.
And then if a team makes it to the state competition, then the district has rules about paying for certain meals for the teams. So then the coach would be able to order a meal while they're at their state competition for the team.
And that's really getting into the first, paragraph under delegation of responsibility. The superintendent or the designee shall approve the list of employees authorized to use the procurement cards, with the list of authorized users being maintained by the business office. So they're delegating the authority down through it, so for people to make good judgments as to who gets to use the cards.
Okay. And if enterprising board members were suspicious that there was grift going on, not that I think that it is, we could say, hey, we want to know who that list of people is.
Correct, and the purchasing cards are reconciled on a monthly basis with the charges reviewed by accounting department staff.
Excellent.
You want to invite Mr. Buck to come review?
You know what?
Card charges some month?
That sounds riveting. No, I mean, I just think that there should be multiple layers of accountability, and I just want to make sure that it's clear what the delegation of responsibility is, how it would proceed, and then what our potential oversight is, because that's one of those areas where you're like, who's going to get high on, the hog on the district's
Well, if I'm
time.
not mistaken, this is all right-to-know information as well, so, it's publicly available. Yeah,
Cool.
Aaron?
Great.
Oh, sorry. Reset?
I'm good.
I just wanted to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. It looks like if there are violations of the policy, we have an existing policy that handles cases. It looks like it references policy 317. Is that correct?
It does.
Okay. I'm just.
I'm quickly looking at 317.
Well, and there'd also be, sometimes there's handbook information too as well about.
317 is conduct disciplinary procedures. It's a very general policy because,
Okay.
again, for the most part, how we go about investigating a claim is about the same for everybody. But what we do after we get the information from the investigation is going to depend on what the contract for that bargaining unit is, or the handbook, or the Act 93 agreement. It's going to depend on the specific language in those documents.
Okay. All right.
And I think someone kindly pointed out to me that district bills would be another place where we might see some of the P card data. Yeah, Deb?
I didn't really think about this in the policy meetings, but for example, in the first paragraph under authority, it says the board directs the administration to establish safeguards to prevent misuse of such cards, which sounds a lot like administrative regulations. So my guess is there are some administrative regulations that will go along with this policy. Or if one wanted to, like, I feel like that's the crux of what Peter was getting at is, like, what are the rules? Do we have them written down? It would be like an administrative regulation if it were written down, and if it were an administrative regulation, then the board could read them if we wanted to.
I am ashamed to say that I did not think of that.
Me
But yes,
neither.
I agree, it should be an administrative regulation, so we'll work together on that.
Sounds good.
That just seems to make some sense, but I totally didn't think about it
Yeah.
when we had it in policy.
Okay. We'll have this one on hold potentially.
Yeah, I think there are administrative regulations because each building secretary who reconciles those, it has a list of things that they, and if
There are
you-
instructions from
There's
accounting.
protocols, yeah.
So we can take the instructions from accounting and make them an AR.
Yeah.
That's why I was thinking it wouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all written down in various places, in various ways. We just want to put it all together and attach it to the policy so it's available for the board and the public. Sounds good. So we'll see that one when we see that one. But assuming that when the ARs are ready, we can bring it back for action.
Sure that it's checked
Okay?
in a new policy.
Any other questions for the policies? All right, I think that covers those.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Dr. Bucher joining us to provide information on the feedback after the Delta presentations. Behave yourself.
He started it.
Enough disruptions. Be good. I could gavel you.
Wow.
I won't, but I. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Just wanted to give an update that we had following the 5 stakeholder presentations that were given. We had sent out feedback for about a 2-week span to people in the community regarding the Delta presentations to get their feedback. We had shared documents that the committee had been working on throughout the process. They're linked there into the memo, impact charts, several other documents, pros and cons as well. So we had 50, we sent the presentation, the email out to about 800 stakeholders, and then 50 people responded to the feedback, and this information helped the committee. Then we went through it, and the last 2 meetings, this information was then shared back with the board as well. So they were able to read the 50 respondents to the feedback. Really at the subsequent meetings that we had, which was 2 weeks ago and last Friday, the last 2 Fridays, this information was helpful to us in formulating assessment of the current feedback and the possible transition plan, as well as starting the process of drafting a recommendation to the superintendent. So that's really just an update on where we are from the presentations to the 5 stakeholders, including one of them being the board, middle school students, high school Delta students, Delta faculty and staff, as well as PTSO. It's come full circle. Yeah, we redacted.
Yeah, there was
names.
some redacted things from the thanks from the comments, but they were sent to the board to review. Any other questions? So Jonathan, we're going to have one more meeting coming up of the committee, I think.
Yeah, so our next meeting is in about a week and a half, and yeah, we'll be. We left our committee meeting really discussing where do we want to be with a recommendation. That would be step 2 of the step 3 in the process. What would that recommendation, elements of that recommendation be, which would be to the superintendent?
Okay. Any other questions on process or the information we received?
I should also clarify, one of the best parts about the feedback was kind of vetting the community sharing what they thought a possible transition plan would look like if if there is a possible yes in this process. That information was useful for what we already collected, and also to kind of vet to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And there were a few things that were suggested from the community that were some good suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So yeah, we put together a list of some transition items that would potentially need to be addressed should change be made, along with some rough timelines about how quickly those could be accomplished, how complicated they were, whose duty it would be to address them, things like that. Do you have a question? Okay. Thanks, Jonathan, very much. So I want to apologize. This meeting has been fraught with lots of twists and turns and bumps. Traditionally, after we approve the HR recommendations, sometimes with substantial hires, we like to recognize them and congratulate them, and we neglected to do that earlier this evening. With this shift to this new consent agenda format, it throws me off a little bit, and some of the rest of us as well. So we would like to thank Jackie Saylor for stepping into our assistant curriculum director role, and we're very pleased to have her and welcome her back to the curriculum office, and enjoy, her company and what she brings to the table for that department. So, yeah, thanks. Better late than never, I hope. So I'm glad you were still here. Finally, we can move on to board reports. So we're going to start with Central Intermediate Unit. Anne, do you have anything in particular? Or Jackie?
We checked with Jackie and nothing new to report.
Okay, sounds good. Ed Foundation is me. Carlene and I already mentioned today, the committee or the foundation got to participate in the presentations for the Advanced Biology Symposium today. That was really cool. Several of the foundation members were there. And basically, a lot of the meeting was spent talking about the Maroon and Gray event, which please mark your calendars. It's Friday, April 26th at 6 p.m. at Center Hills Golf Course or Country Club. And there are quite a few nominees or honorees this year. They're all listed on the foundation website. There's some pretty interesting stories in there. I encourage you to go check those out. Next up, we have CTC Local Advisory Committee. Carlene, have you guys met?
I missed the meeting.
Yes,
sorry,
so I will actually give this update. So on Friday, we met, had a meeting for the Perkins planning process. So annually, CPI and SCASD get funding from the federal government, passed through the state, from the Perkins Act to support CTE programming. So in this case, our CTC. So the Perkins planning budget for SCASD, I think I want to say they had a total of we have a total of $82,000 spent in the SCASD budget. That's provided by the Perkins funding. That's intended to be supplemental and supportive rather than replacing funding. So we can't use that as our base. But so it's we covered big expenditures for things in health professions. Most of the programs were kind of represented. One of the things that we're excited to purchase is the Aspire Ed for the Educator Rising curriculum, as we're trying to get the education portion approved, and also our engineering program we expect to be approved this summer. So, yeah.
Great, thanks very much. After those reports, oh my goodness. This is a night, let me tell you. We have Citizens Advisory Committee liaison. So Carlene, athletics, did you guys meet? No. Okay. Facilities, Gretchen? No meeting?
No,
Finance?
that's this
It's coming up.
Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read that list in a little bit. Finance, Deborah, Aaron, did you guys meet?
Yes, we met. Sorry, we met. We basically went over the proposed final budget that was presented tonight. The majority of the conversation kind of talked about the highlights of the budget, like new positions, the big healthcare expense, and just to highlight again, like that increase is like a 25% increase over the previous year. So we were so excited about how well we did with healthcare expenses the previous year, and I think the increase is more reflective of the reality of the world. But we had such a good experience those first 2 years that we were, hopeful. But yeah, exactly, it was a little sad. But it's a big deal, and that is a big expense. But we're dealing with it. So we talked about that, and Randy also, I think, gave a little bit of an update about the district-wide facilities master plan as well. So
Great. School health and safety, have you guys had a meeting, Ann or
We
Dan?
rescheduled from the 11th to the 18th.
Okay.
So not yet.
Not yet, okay. Technology?
No, we'll have one again next quarter.
Yeah,
Okay,
we will.
Sounds good. Okay. And I also want to thank Bruno for joining us. I think tonight's your last night, is that right? So we appreciate your input and your presence. We really enjoyed having you, so hopeful. And you're graduating this year, right? Yes. So we wish you the best. So that concludes our agenda for this evening, and looking forward to future meetings. We have April 18th, as mentioned, Community Advisory Committee for Facilities. That's 4 p.m. here in Panorama Village Boardroom. April 24th, Policy Development Committee meeting at 1:30 in the boardroom here. April 24th, also we have District-Wide Facility Master Plan Community Forum. That's going to be 6 p.m. at Grayswood Elementary Cafeteria. And then similar, basically the same kind of district-wide community forum will be at Park Forest Middle School on April 29th at 6 p.m. So you can attend either of those and get some background information and provide input at those dates. And with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Have a good evening, everyone.